Hello friends. In this video, we explore who invented the tomahawk and whether it is true that the Bible was the first printed book. The Bible is the first printed book in history. Ask anyone what the first printed book was called, and anyone with even a passing knowledge of history will say Johann Gutenberg's Bible. However, not everyone knows that Gutenberg, who began creating books in this way in the 1450s, was the first in Europe, but not in the world. Much earlier, the Diamond Sutra, also known as the Sutra of Perfect Wisdom, which cuts through the darkness of ignorance like a bolt of lightning, was printed. It was created in China, and the afterword to it says the following: "It made with reverence for free distribution to all by Wang Zhe on behalf of his parents on the 15th day of the 4th moon of the year Xiangtong, i.e. May 11th, 868. So the Chinese were almost 600 years ahead of Gutenberg with his printing press. However, mass production technology did not take hold there. The Swedes elected their burgomasters with the help of lice. There is another interesting historical anecdote circulating on the internet. About 100 years ago, the Swedes in Gothenburg used lice to elect their burgomaster. The candidates for the position sat around a table and placed their beards on it. A louse was placed in the middle of the table. The mayor was elected based on whose beard the louse crawled onto. That's democracy, right? This anecdote is usually used when people want to say that all politicians are the same and it doesn't matter who gets into power. But the quote does not belong to a historian, but to the Soviet zoologist Pavel Yustinovich Mayakovsky. He mainly studied insects, and whether he can be trusted in terms of history is an open question. Most likely, Mayakovsky borrowed this story from the book Rats, Lice and History, written by another zoologist, Hans Zinser. The latter, in turn, took the story of the lousy elections from the memoirs of Pierre Daniel Hugh, Bishop of Avranches. However, the action took place not in Sweden, but in Hardenberg, Netherlands. The editor of the bishop's memoirs noted that such a practice had never existed there, and Hugh had invented this joke for fun, so it is still not worth trusting the election of a mayor to lice. In the Middle Ages, people believed in a special set of notes for summoning the devil. On the internet, you can find a story that supposedly in the Middle Ages, people believed that a special combination of sounds, a musical interval of 3 tones, or a tritone, was capable of summoning Satan. No bloody sacrifices or complex rituals were needed. Anyone who could play 3 chords in a row could surely summon the devil. In the Middle Ages, this tritone was considered so dangerous that it was banned by the church. Anyone who dared to include it in their work would be instantly sent to the stake by the Inquisition. But this is a myth. It was popularized by rock musician Ozzy Osbourne in his book Uncensored Autobiography. And then Tony came up with this creepy riff. I moaned some melody over it, and the result was damn cool. At that moment, it was the best thing we had ever composed. Later, I was told that Tony's riff was based on the so-called Devil's Interval, or tritone. It was banned in church music in the Middle Ages because it scared people to death. Ozzy may have taken this statement from musicologist Andreas Werkmeister's 1702 work. In it, the author wrote, "Me against FA is the devil in music." But this is the earliest mention of the tritone in this context. There are no medieval documents confirming its ban. Moreover, the tritone was regularly used in medieval church compositions, and music theorists of the time did not shy away from including it in their treatises. In the end, the devil was never summoned, and no one was burned for it. The combat hatchet, or tomahawk, was invented by Native Americans. When you hear the word tomahawk, you immediately think of the hatchets used by Native Americans in North America. But few people know that this weapon was not actually invented by them. The word tomahawk, was used by Native Americans to refer to any short-handled weapon, clubs, stone hatchets, pickaxes, and so on. And they looked something like this. The classic metal hatchet, which we are accustomed to calling a tomahawk, was brought to America by Europeans. It is nothing more than a boarding axe. It was used to cut the enemy's rope nets when they tried to climb aboard. And even outside of battle, the axe is a useful tool. It can be used to cut rope, chop wood, hammer nails, and butcher game. It was precisely because of its versatility that this tool became so popular with the Indians, and they willingly traded with the palefaces in exchange for hatchets made in factories in England, France, Holland, and Spain. The locals were only able to replace it with a very primitive version, heavier and without eyelets. So the tomahawk literally has only its name in common with the Indians. Edward II was killed by sticking a red-hot poker up his rear end. The Middle Ages were a harsh time, but sometimes its horrors are exaggerated just a little bit. For example, here is an episode described in Maurice Druon's novel, The French Wolf. The conspirators decided to remove the weak and foolish King Edward II from the throne. They staged a rebellion and imprisoned the ruler. Then they began to decide how to kill him without leaving any traces of violent death. But how to do it? Right, stick a red-hot rod where no one would dare look when examining the body. It's a gruesome story, but it's just fiction. Modern historians are more than skeptical about the tale of the red-hot rods and agree that Edward II died in prison from illness, as early records claim. If he was helped to pass away, it was by suffocation. Red-hot iron is certainly not the tool of choice for a secret murder. Stories about the king's shameful murder with a poker appeared in later medieval sources, whose authors openly disliked the monarch. If you liked the video, please like it and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Your support is very important.